anyone who's ready, can I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Motion to approve, Santos.
Okay, do I get a second?
I'll second it. Robert Burl, second.
Roll.
Did you get a second, Carolyn?
Got it.
Okay, all in favor, just raise hands.
Aye.
There we go.
Aye.
Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody to this month's crazy meeting of the Milpitas Historical Society. It's great to see all of you. Looks like we have 20 people so far.
Wow.
Wow.
We're gonna have a nice time today. For those who don't know, if you look up in the right corner of your screen where it says view, you might want to just put it into speaker view rather than gallery view, and then we will see whoever's on screen at that point. All right. So let us start with Carolyn.
I need speaker view, do we? Yeah.
I'm gonna go mute everybody here for a second. Hold on a second.
Yeah, he's gonna mute us all.
Leave.
Oh, that's very quiet now. Okay, Carolyn, you can unmute and you can present the minutes.
Okay. The minutes for the March 10th, 2021 general meeting. The meeting was called to order at 7:08 p.m. by President Bill Hare. The agenda was read. Mary Ann Udich moved to approve the agenda and Joe Ehart seconded the motion and it passed. Carolyn Tiernan read the minutes from the February 10th, 2021 general meeting. Danny Cosper moved to approve and Joe Ehart seconded it and it passed. Joe Ehart presented the treasurer's report. Current assets were $64,324.39. Danny Cosper moved to accept and Richard Santos seconded and it passed. The presentation that evening was the movie Meet Mary Pleasant by Dr. Sushil Bibbs. Mary Pleasant is considered the mother of civil rights in California. I found it very interesting. After that, Dr. Sushil Bibbs answered questions about Mary Pleasant and her life. There were no announcements. The meeting was adjourned at 8:51 p.m. Mike Pellizzari moved to adjourn. Danny Cosper seconded, and it passed.
Great. That's the end? Got it? Okay, if anybody wants to unmute themselves, they can make a motion to accept the minutes.
Motion to accept, Santos.
Okay, can someone unmute and give me a second?
Second,
Okay, I think that was Harriet.
yes.
Yep, all in favor, just raise hands. Great, any opposed? All right, we will move on to Joe with the treasurer's report.
Okay, everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So the overview on financial assets is we have the $40,000 CD still for a few more months. Our checking account, our overall checking funds are $19,591.96. Of that, you can see the second blue line, $1,030 are the current contributions to the Elaine Levine Memorial Fund. And so those funds are actually reserved for that particular project. Our other account, which is what we use to maintain the acquisitions and things and for the society and what physical assets we have $4,455.65 and we have $100 in petty cash. So our financial assets, total financial assets, you can see there are just over $64,000. Briefly, because we didn't have a lot of deposits or a lot of checks, a lot of expenses last month, but that's that middle column. So we had 16 cents in interest on our checking account and $45.75 on that CD that I mentioned. And we had a new donation of $50. You notice it says year to date is $830, but there's actually $200 from the prior year, which explains the $1,030 total at the moment. So our deposits, those 3 deposits for the month of March, totaled $95.91. And you can see over at the right, we currently have deposits of a little over $2,200 at this point. So let me see. So let me, expenses were fairly straightforward. Hostmonster.com, the domain renewal, this is a once-a-year expense. The website, milpitashistory.org, that particular domain name, it's something that you have to keep maintaining the rights to, and it's an annual renewal, and that's the $17.99. There was a reimbursement for, I actually set up at a discount, a Zoom Standard Pro thing, which is an annual subscription. It's an annual contract that we have. And if I recall, I think I had a 25% discount. So I wrote a check for $112.42, and the society reimbursed me for that. And Catherine bought stamps, 100 stamps, and I reimbursed her for that. So our expenses were $185.41. And this is the account that we use to maintain, basically our physical assets. And there were a few acquisitions that you can see, but an annual, but basically the simple thing, the most recent expense was that I bought 2 coins dated 1914, which are close to the opening of Milpitas' second grammar school. You can see the first one was in 1856, and it was over on the Weller property, and the second grammar school is where the library is now. And so those are 2 coins that I'll use in our educational outreach project with first graders and third graders, so I can show them how money might have looked at the opening of some of our old elementary schools. So anyway, our current balance is, we have is $4,455.65 of money still remaining. And this is just also an overview. It's this is our fundraiser where we work at Milpitas Charity Bingo. And this is what we've earned to date, $4,455, which is really pretty good. Our most recent, actually we worked in March, but we only received the check and so on. So anyway, bottom line is that we're continuing to raise money this way. Okay, that's the end of the treasurer's report.
All righty. There you are. So can I have somebody unmute themselves and give me a motion to receive the treasurer's report?
Motion to accept the treasurer's report, Santos.
Okay, Santos again wins. Give me a second, someone.
Second.
All right, Harriet wins again. All in favor, just raise your hand. Okay, anybody opposed? Don't see any opposed. Okay, we can now move on. Now we get the stars of our show. Wait, I just lost the whole window. There you are. Okay, so we have Mort Levine here. When you say hi, Deva, can you unmute?
We're unmuted.
Oh, there you are. Good, perfect. Okay, so we have Mort Levine and his daughter Deva, who is the daughter also of Elaine, and we're going to talk about Elaine today a lot, I'm sure. For those who don't know, Elaine was one of the co-founders of our society, the reason that we're here, and was probably the main impetus to push it through. And we're very excited about that. But we're going to hear from you now and take it away.
Okay. I want to thank everybody for the society for suggesting this evening.
I'm sorry. Let's unmute again. I am sorry. I was muting somebody else and you popped in the way. I am so sorry.
Okay, we're unmuted.
Good.
And I'm trying to get it on active speaker view, but for some reason, mostly what I see is you, Bill. Okay, he's
not
muted,
good.
but we're not.
Right. Yeah,
We're
I don't
good.
think, I don't
Okay.
think you're going to see yourself in speaker view.
That's okay. All right, we don't
Okay.
need to see ourselves.
Right. Well, I want to thank everybody for inviting us to participate this evening, particularly because it provided me with an opportunity to reflect on the role Elaine played in our sort of mutual adventure in Milpitas and in Santa Clara Valley over the past better than a half century. I won't repeat the details of her specific accomplishments that were itemized quite accurately in the current issue of the Society's newsletter. But I did want to spend a little time in the early days and get a sense of what Milpitas was like when we first came here, and also how we came to choose Milpitas, and also how the preparation for her career developed from her earliest childhood days. And I won't spend a lot of time on it, but I will try to hit the highlights. As we said in it was printed in the newsletter, Elaine grew up on a what I have to admit was a kind of a marginal farm in the beautiful rolling hills of southern Wisconsin. Just a magnificent setting to grow up in, but it had both its charms and its punishments. For example, every winter, the glacial moraine that underlaid the farm area would send up a crop of rocks to be gathered and distributed before you could plant in the summer and the spring. And the winters in Wisconsin are notably not welcoming for human habitation. So a lot of people came west, and we were among them.
Can I ask a question right here?
Yeah.
So my mom, Elaine, well, I'll probably just call Elaine here. She was born and raised on a really rural environment in Wisconsin, on a farm, a dairy farm, a small dairy farm. And you were born and raised in New York City, a very urban guy.
Yeah.
And so I guess what I'm asking first is, what kind of things, what kind of values did she get from being on the farm that kind of carried through in her life?
Right. Well, clearly, if you're going to stay on a farm and make it as successful as you could, you needed a very strong work ethic. And I think Elaine exemplified that from her earliest days. She had no brothers to help her father. And so she and a younger sister, May Schrank, did what they could. And of course, Esther Schrank was really the driving force for that family. That was Elaine's mother, and a lot of Esther's characteristics were inherited by Elaine. The contrast between my upbringing and Elaine's couldn't have been sharper. We met on the campus of the University of Wisconsin, where she had transferred from a 2-year course that was trying in vain to teach her to be an occupational therapist. And because the college she went to, Milwaukee Downer, had such a good English literature and poetry department, she was wooed away to pursue her own writing as well as reading, and occupational therapy went out the window. The university had a student daily, which I happened to be editing at the time, and I was ahead of Elaine by about 2 years at Wisconsin. And so I was trying to pull together a staff this was in 1946, and it was a heady time because the year before the campus had 4,000 students, and this 46 incoming class was 17,000, and mostly GIs. And I was coming back from the Navy myself. And I went down to the lakeside, beautiful Lake Mendota, and looked around, and there were some very pretty girls, which attracted my attention. And I said, I'm recruiting for the Daily Cardinal, and we're looking for reporters. And Elaine's hand popped up right away. And the next day she was on the staff, and turned out she had a pretty good handle on how to put a feature story together. And so we both worked on the Student Daily as our extracurricular activity till I graduated, and then she finished up afterward. Her major in college was American institutions, and I think it proved to be an ideal subject matter for a life as a community newspaper editor and publisher.
So how did you get from Wisconsin, where I was born, by the way, back in 1951? How did you get to California?
Oh, well, it wasn't exactly a covered wagon. It was a 46 Chrysler, but they were pretty big cars at that time. So we had all our belongings in there, and we set out from the farm, and took us about a week to cross the country, maybe 10 days. And we of course, Deva was with us as a toddler. And
I bet that was fun.
well, it especially when we hit that restaurant in Dalhart, Texas, where you went around to every table and introduced yourself. It was fun actually to go across country, except something was wrong with the car every other day that we had to patch up or fix up. But we had friends, and Elaine and Deva were stayed on with their friends. And I went up the coast looking for an editing job on a community newspaper, and had about 6 offers. It was a good time because California newspapers were expanding with the growth in the state. And I took a job with an inspiring publisher named Don Machin in Los Altos, who had started his paper in that town, which had been recently incorporated, and worked in Los Altos. We lived in Los Altos for about a year. And then I read in the Mercury that there was a board plant building in Milpitas. And I said, I got to look at this. And we went across on a rainy day through El Viso and winding around the south edge of the bay. At that time, the roads were pretty pathetic. And basically wound up looking over the board plant's superstructure, but also talking to local merchants, of which there were very few. I do remember that we had conversations at the Fat Boy Barbecue where Lee and Bob Wall said, what do we need a newspaper for? We know everything that's going on in town. And they probably were right, because there was only about 250 families living in the Milpitas area at that point, and except if I didn't count the what was called the jail farm, but it was actually both an old age home and a minimum security jail, Elmwood, it was called. And so fortunately, when it came time to pull a city together, which Ford agreed to, the registrar of voters said the people at Elmwood should have the right to vote on this also. They live in Milpitas. And so it passed overwhelmingly, and the city was created.
What year was that?
That would have been 1954. And we actually then found a large vacant home on Main Street, right at the end of the Milpitas Alviso Road, which was owned by the Giacomazzi family, that also owned a 2-story building across the alley, which was like a general store. And we took over the Giacomazzi home, and half of it became our newspaper office, and the other half was living quarters for our growing family, because we had shortly a second daughter, Meg. And there's an interesting cartoon that Bob Burrell found in an early issue of the Post, I guess, and I had forgotten totally about, and I'll see if we can show it on the.
So if you can see this, this is a cartoon of our family at that time. So you can see Mort and Elaine busily working away, and my younger sister in the playpen, and I'm obviously dumping things out of the garbage.
And Elaine was editing the newspaper. It was organized chaos, but also our work was very often interrupted by people who just dropped in and said, "What's going on in here?" And a newspaper in Milpitas. And our plan was to not only send the paper by mail to every resident in town, but also use additional copies to distribute at the Richmond Ford plant, which was still operating at that time. And our first issue came out on the 5th of February, 1955, 55, 54, 55.
Mhm.
And with the first car coming off the assembly line at the Ford plant. So it was a timely arrival for all of us.
Let me interject something here, because I remember living in the back of the office very clearly when I was a youngster. And also I have a memory of going to the Ford plant and with my mom and dad, and I was just a little kid. And so I had to tag along because they didn't have a babysitter, I'm sure. And they had too many doors as the people would stream out of the Ford plant at the end of a shift. And they had too many doors for just Mort and Elaine to cover and hand every single one of them a free paper. And so they telegrammed or wrote or whatever my aunt, my mother's sister May in Wisconsin, and said, come on out. And so she came on out, and before they even let her unpack her bags, they handed her a bunch of newspapers and stood her at the gate. And I remember seeing all the workers come out, and they had to open their metal lunch boxes to show they weren't stealing anything. And then they'd close the lunchbox and leave, and they'd be handed a newspaper. And there's an early memory.
Yeah.
So early Milpitas, that's really, I guess, why you came to Milpitas, is because it was going to boom right then.
Well, we
And
thought it was anyway. It was booming in some sense. Milpitas was growing rapidly in terms of residential subdivision growth. Didn't get much in the way of commercial growth at that time. There was one small shopping center built, but there was hardly an advertising base available for the newspaper's sustenance. So went out, we both, Elaine and I, went out to various other possible advertisers, San Jose in particular, and were given quite a welcome in the sense that the San Jose area was very eager to get the Ford plant, even though although it was called the San Jose Ford plant at Milpitas, California. It was in the city of Milpitas, but San Jose was very happy because really industry coming to that into the Santa Clara Valley at that time was rather slow to pick up. This was all still orchard country, and the high-tech industry wasn't exactly in its present form. It mostly was a bunch of contractors who worked for the military, and so it was good news for the whole area when Ford came.
there's a lot you can say. There's so much you could say about building a newspaper, starting over in a new state and whatnot, but I really think people would like to hear what Milpitas was like back in the 50s first.
Yeah.
And then we can contrast that to what happened afterwards.
Right. The Milpitas community had to organize itself into a governing entity because it had really stood still for so many decades. And there was a very prophetic planning report done by the Santa Clara County planners, who labeled it an arrested community meets the 20th century. And basically described how many deficits Milpitas had to fill in order to get organized. But it gave a blueprint. And obviously, the first thing they were able to organize was a fire district, which they already had some volunteer fire efforts. And so firefighting became an active kind of leisure activity for a lot of the men in the volunteer group. And so everybody who came to town was pressed into becoming a volunteer fireman.
You were a fireman, a volunteer fireman too.
Yes, indeed. Of course, we lived right next door to the fire department, which was located just one building over from our office and home. But in organizing a fire department was just one of many things that had to get started from scratch. And the city had to be put together after the election and the incorporation. They hired a very sharp young city manager, and they had some very energetic city councilmen, including Kathy Cardoza's dad, who was vice mayor, and Tom Cardoza, and Tom Evett was the mayor at the time. Pete Rogers, brother of the postmaster, Ben Rogers, was a councilman, and so was Al Carlo, who had the Cozy Kitchen. And Jack Johns represented the southern end of Milpitas, which was down toward Capitol Avenue. And so the city government was pulled together, starting off in that tiny little building adjacent to the fire station. I think it might have been built for that purpose, but I don't remember. But I also need to stress that many of the women in the community who took an active interest in what was happening, and some of them, everybody was holding meetings, 2 or 3 meetings a week of various kinds, organizing new groups and getting various services needed for the town, starting a library, starting a sewage system, and many other similar things. There was a heady atmosphere in early day Milpitas of not only optimism and enthusiasm, but there was also a feeling that we're on the right track and had set in motion something really worthwhile that was going to survive.
So say something about, I get that this was a very small community and it was burgeoning, and both you and Elaine just jumped right into the community, made friends, sold advertising, passed out newspapers, got very involved, went to school board meetings and all that. Tell me some of the roles that Elaine played.
Well, she was in charge of the business side of the newspaper in terms of actually physically doing the bookkeeping to start with, and ultimately had somebody to help her. And then she also wrote 2 or 3 stories. If a phone call came in saying somebody had a baby, she'd be on the phone and getting all the information. And we also found that there were, Bob Burrell remembers this kind of thing. We really dedicated ourselves to be the paper with the pictures. And so we had volunteers and then finally paid people a pittance, but they got some money to take local pictures. And I remember somebody had been invited as a speaker to speak at one of the elementary schools. I think it was Spangler. And he said, I picked up a copy of the Milpitas Post and I noticed it had a lot of pictures in it. And a little girl raised her hand and said, I was in it last week. And then he said, anybody else have their picture in the paper? And everybody in the classroom raised their hands. So we were also on the cusp of technological change for how you produce newspapers. And that meant we had to re-educate ourselves on equipment. Elaine pioneered the idea of using an IBM electric or C-electric, which had just come out. It was a typewriter with a ball. And some of you may remember
Oh,
that.
it had the fonts.
Yeah, which held the typeface. And it had some very nice typefaces that you could get by changing the ball. And then, but it had to be typed twice in order to justify the right hand and left hand straight margins and to make a column of type. So Elaine taught herself to do that, and that's how we produced the paper from the very beginning.
She was a very fast typist.
She was a fast typist.
I used to try and get her to type my papers when I was in high school.
Yeah, well, she also found that there were other processes that she'd had to learn, and she did. And so it was, in a sense, a throwback to the farm, where if a job had to be done, you did it. And but she was a good sport about it, even though there were lots of long hours, and she covered a lot of meetings. And she even wrote a column called About Home, which talked about different things her children had done, and some of them proved embarrassing to the kids.
Yes. I think she fancied that was sort of a homespun Irma Bombeck column, because it was humorous, the About Home column.
Yeah.
And but she really, I think, if I have to think back on how kind of remarkable she was and how many different qualities she had, I know that she would have liked to have been described as a writer. You know, that's really something that she very much viewed herself as a writer. And in fact, in our home, she had a typewriter set up at all times. And another element of that is that she was very organized, so that we would always have a menu for the week on the refrigerator, and next to it would be the shopping list based on the menu. And if we had to have a note for our teacher saying, yes, Debbie can go on the field trip, she would type it up, and she would type up her checks and everything. She was very organized. And so I once asked her how she got everything done. I mean, because there was so much that she did, raising 4 children. We had, at one point, we even had one of my sisters had a friend move in. So we had another girl. So we had a foster child as well. going to all these late night meetings, covering things, managing people once the newspaper got bigger. She did a lot of personnel management as an editor and publisher.
That's right.
And I asked her how she got it all done. She goes, oh, well, we were young then.
Yeah. Elaine's qualities complemented mine and also contrasted not only the fact that we were brought up in two different kind of societies, but the fact that I always had a much more easygoing attitude, and for me, the glass was always half full, and Elaine was just the opposite, and her ideas were often clashed with mine, and so I said, okay, you can have it your way. I think I said that. But in reality, we did complement each other's skill sets, and that helped our paper's growth.
I would like to interject here. I think that is absolutely true. Their personalities are amazingly meshed and very, very different. They always worked very well together. And my dad is really very entrepreneurial, always has big ideas. And then my mom would make it happen. You know, she was very practical. She would make lists, and then she would, you know, work on the maintenance element after you created something.
Well, and also her role in hiring people. She was fairly astute at selecting people who had great potential and not always a great resume. By and large, when we grew to a company with 130 or 140 people, she was still managing the human relations side of newspapers for us. I should mention that we, as the town grew, we also, but our efforts to expand our newspaper operations grew as well. And we acquired some newspapers and we started others. And the first one we started was in East San Jose, which had never had a newspaper. And in a sense, it was a polyglot of different communities sort of thrown together. But it was a very successful paper for several decades. And then we acquired papers on the west side of the valley and eventually merged, well, I should say we acquired a company that had a lot of cutting edge equipment for that day. And we built a very successful printing plant as well, printing other people's newspapers. So, and we kept growing the newspaper activity right through, well, I remember, I think it was about 1979. And so about a quarter century, and we remained in Milpitas as our headquarters. And then we moved the group, although we kept an office always in Milpitas, we moved the group to Cupertino, and where this other plant was located. And then when the people we had sold the newspapers to couldn't make it and were disposing of newspapers, we bought back the Milpitas Post.
So it kind of makes a full circle,
It
coming
was,
back to your first paper.
right.
can I ask you a question about the Milpitas Historical Society? And I think that one of the things that really struck me about Mom's personality is that she was not really out there in front. I mean, you were kind of the front person. She was kind of the back person.
Sure.
And she always loved to interview people and listen to them. And she loved to promote them. And so I think this is how the Historical Society actually started, is it was one of those things that she was kind of pushing from the background. I don't know what year that happened.
I think it was,
When was that?
1981 was the year that he got together to put the Historical Society together. Yeah.
right. I think our discussions about historical societies began much before that. One of the things Elaine took on as a personal assignment was doing oral histories of some of the people who founded Milpitas and were very influential in its growth. And she did, I think, about a dozen or 15 of them. Many of them created articles that appeared in the paper, but she had these, it was like a material you really couldn't duplicate years later, because it was firsthand, fresh. And these oral histories, I think the society owns these now, at least the ones that were rescued. But we did talk at that time that this is the kind of thing an historical society should be keeping as a treasured archive. And so when at some point, didn't ask my permission or anything, or tell me about it, she just set up a lunch with Leo Murphy, the assistant superintendent of schools, and with Ed Cavallini, the librarian in town, and Bob McGuire, who was a man about town in every way. And those three people plus Elaine agreed that the Historical Society was an absolute must, that Milpitas had to get going. And so she pushed them all, even though none of them would have initiated it on his own, thinking maybe this has to come from somebody else or something.
Can you talk a little bit? I know there's a lot of people probably have questions, but can you talk a little bit before we kind of go to questions about the role of women in the growing, changing valley that we live in?
Well, it's very clear that, and we can't take any credit for this, none of us can, but this was a very lucky place to grow up, do business in, and for most everyone, for all the reasons we now know well, the Santa Clara Valley, the Valley of Heart's Delight, they used to call it, morphed into Silicon Valley, and essentially brought these very bright people, very energetic people together. And in effect, it was a very heady atmosphere of challenge and new ideas. And I think that it was obviously, though, a men's club or an old boys club, except these are a lot of young boys. starting all these businesses. And we fortunately did run into a small handful of really bright, motivated women who were looking for the satisfaction of achieving things on their own. And Elaine joined in with them. And as many of you recall, suddenly Santa Clara County had 5 women supervisors, or that all the legislative offices were held by women. That there was so much dynamism there that that women just swept their way in. And of course, there were a handful of women executives, very few in the newspaper business, I might add. And so Elaine was prompted, talking to the State Publishers Association, to give talks at our annual convention about the role of women, and then organized a women's subgroup among of the publishers who would get together at the convention, and women executives who shared problems of being women in essentially a male-dominated industry. So she was ahead of her time in that regard, for sure.
I wonder if there's any last minute things you want to say before we ask for questions, or there's some part of something that we didn't touch on. So many things.
Yeah, well, I would love to hear if there are some questions that the attendees might have. And I know, Deva, you had some other ideas that you wanted to talk about. But I would just sum up the fact that this was a woman who brought together the kind of skills and character and values that were needed for the time. And she left her mark in many ways, in many areas. I didn't mention,
Now that you think of it.
now that I think about it, there are a number of interests she had. She retired earlier than I did. She put a lot of effort into helping the master gardeners. She was a good gardener herself, and she became a master gardener and wrote a book for them on vines, and did a lot of special projects for master gardeners. She also got interested in historic preservation, and we remodeled, or had remodeled a house that we still live in, or I still live in, and that where Elaine took great pleasure in establishing gardens and this historic home. So those are just a couple of special interests she had. She was also a great traveler, and we went a number of fascinating destinations. So just a full life of achievement, productivity, and giving back to the community.
Yeah, a real legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bill, could I ask a question? This is Dick Santos.
Yes.
Go ahead, Dick.
Mr. Levine, could you expand and talk about Dr. Curlin? Because when I was a child, that was the only doctor we had from Alviso to Milpitas, Dr. Curlin.
Right. Well, Al Curlin was, he was a very interesting guy. I remember him quite well. He lived in this historic house, which was called the Smith House for a while, then occupied by, after Dr. Curlin left, well, at any rate, there DeVries, the Smith DeVries house. And DeVries was a highway patrolman who took it over from Doc Curlin. And it's now been remodeled, although they saved the outline of the house so that historically, I think it's very close to the original. But Curlin was the only doctor in town, and he would make house calls and things like that. And
Was he a general practitioner?
he was a general practitioner. Yes.
And his nurse, May.
He delivered me,
Oh, wow.
Oh,
he-
no kidding.
and I think he delivered Joanne Souza and maybe Kathy Cardoza. Yeah.
Yes, I would absolutely bet he delivered Kathy.
He delivered Joanne Pimentel in 1942. And I understand that he has a grandson that's practicing medicine in Chico, California.
Oh, no
How about
kidding.
that?
Yeah. Well, we were on a cruise boat in the Galapagos Islands, and everybody introduced themselves. There were about 15, 20 passengers, and everybody introduced themselves. And one woman introduced herself as being from Wisconsin and a name Ullman. And Elaine said, "Oh yeah, your father delivered me."
I think that when you were traveling, you were always running into people you knew somewhere in
Yeah,
different countries.
Yeah, that happens to me all the time too. It's very interesting. You can be so far away and see someone you haven't seen
Yeah.
for a long time who lives about 10 miles from you. Hey, one note I wanted to point out to everybody, I have put in the chat a link to some of those interviews that Mort had mentioned. So
Oh,
those all came to me through Ed Cavallini when he
Right.
retired. And I transcribed a lot of them here in my recording studio, and they are
great.
online, and the link is in the chat screen window there. So you can all listen to some of those interviews. I think the oldest interview actually is from 1971 with Weller Kirtner.
Oh yeah, I've often thought that she might have missed Weller Kirtner. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah,
Weller
it's a great interview.
certainly was a tremendous source of institutional memory for the whole region, and one of a kind.
That interview with Weller Kirtner was made just 3 months before he passed away.
Is that right? Oh, well, I was
Yeah.
fortunate. Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions? I mean, talk about a historical perspective.
I have a question, Mort. When did you move to South Main Street? Didn't the Post move down to South Main Street? Because I live
Yes.
on South Main Street.
Yeah, we did. What happened was Joe Betancourt came back to town. He had been a fisherman. At any rate, Betancourt, he was a fisherman, and he came and he needed he wanted to invest his earnings, and he bought the land right at the end of Milpitas Alviso Road on Main Street, and built a strip mall, a shopping center there. And he told me he was going to destroy the Giacomazzi house. And I said, "Oh, that would be a shame." although it was a sort of worn out wreck in a sense. He said, if you want it, you can have it for nothing. And
Oh, okay.
so I said, okay, I tended to do that kind of thing. And then tell Elaine about it.
And then she'd go, how are we gonna move that house? And where to?
And then I went out looking and I found a lot in South Main Street, 615, I think it was South Main. Wasn't too far south, maybe 8-10 blocks south of where we were. And then one day, a big outfit, big trucks, and a gang of people showed up and took them 4 or 5 hours blocking Main Street to move the building down to that site. And we began remodeling that. And
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I never knew that. And I just lived down the street.
The other thing is that the house was changed in orientation because it was long and narrow with the narrow part facing Main Street. And then it was turned sideways
Right.
with arches later on when it became a complete office. And at
And
that
you know-
time,
You know
Go ahead.
what? I think it's still there, Mort.
yeah, I know it is.
It is there.
And it was a very smart architect who always hated when I came into his office because I would always give him projects that are really near impossible. But I said, I'd like you to make this to look good. And he said, okay, well, we'll give it a bunch of Roman arches.
Yeah.
And as alongside of a very dull building, it now has a romantic.
That's
view.
interesting. I've been there all my life and I didn't know that story. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very neat. I see Rob had his hand up.
Yeah, I
Oh,
did.
yeah.
Mort, it's great to see you. It's great to see everyone. I was editor and publisher of the Post from 2000 to 2015. So I had the pleasure and worked for Mort since 1993. So I really was so fortunate to have him as a mentor all those years as a young college kid, a week out of school. And Mort taught me a lot. And I, deeply grateful, forever be grateful for that. Mort, I've never asked you this question, but I wanted to ask, in the 45 years, give or take, that you own the Post, is there one thing that you're most proud of over those years where the Post had an impact in, on it through its editorials, through enterprise?
I would say, well, I would say that the period of the 70s, and this is Elaine's doing, not mine, but she went out looking for reporters, and we were in an expansion era, and she hired some of the brightest and best reporters that I have ever seen collected in one newspaper operation, and they wrote some wonderful stuff during that period. Some of it was investigative. A lot of them was simply descriptive of what's going on. And we certainly had our share of some prize-winning pieces, but one comes to mind, and you probably remember this. There was a city manager who got into real trouble in Milpitas, and there was a lot of cover-up going on and things that anonymous letters that we would receive and then have to figure out how to get them verified. And I don't remember a lot of the detail, but we put out a special edition.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember his name now.
Yeah, I remember it. I'll spare the details, but it was in 1999 or 1996. The woman who's now my wife happened to be the reporter at that time, who was at the council meeting, and who called me at midnight that night and said, "You're not going to believe this." And so I think I called you at 6 a.m, and the paper had already been printed. And we agreed that we wanted to put out an extra, which was very uncommon at that time. And we did a 4-page extra
Yeah.
that detailed, I think we called it, what night are council meetings? Tuesday night still? I think we called it the Bloody Tuesday something or
Yeah.
other. And because everyone got fired and a lot of bad things happened in one night. And we won a CMPA award for that because you approved going ahead with an extra. That I remember that very clearly.
Yeah, that was one highlight. But it was overall, there are so many satisfactions. It would be hard to pick out those highlights.
Great, thank you very much. It's great to see you.
Okay, Don, and then Robert Burrell.
Well, this is not a question, but it was just a statement that I'd like Mort to know that the most interesting, fun, informative, enjoyable afternoon that I've ever had was a 3-hour shift selling sodas in a Rotary booth for the Art and Wine Festival. Consisted of Mort Levine and myself. This was just a couple of years after I came to town. I had the building at 529 South Main Street.
Oh, yeah.
And Mort talked practically nonstop about that building and Rotary. And I think I can remember just about all of it. And it was so interesting. And I want to thank you for that. And that was really made a great impression for a young man just moving his business to Milpitas.
Thank you for that memory.
Great, let's hear from the Milpitas Monster.
Well, the
Oh, yeah.
Milpitas Monster was one thing, thanks to Mort, but yeah, I was a young photography teacher and I needed to learn photography. So I camped at the Milpitas Post and met Phil Nelson and some of the other young photographers that did such a wonderful job. And as a historical society president, I was honored to work with Mabel Mattis, and we built the Milpitas book. And there's nice little illustrations. Thanks to Rob DeVincenzi, you can see it at the end of that book, Milpitas. But I want to say to everybody in Milpitas to realize that, and maybe Rob can help me, let me state or find out the history of how we put this together. But in the Milpitas Library, everybody should know that we have the Milpitas Post on microfiche. It's there, and all of the history of Milpitas is in the Milpitas Post. And what's missing is a reader's guide. We don't have a reader's guide, so we need to have the Historical Society realize that if they go online and look up 1950, 53 was the Star, then 54 was the Post.
Right.
And in it, if we could just go through and build a reader's guide where you find the names and you put them in alphabetical order. You could look up every name of people involved in the city of Milpitas, and it's there. All the history needs to be organized in the form of a reader's guide, because Mort and Rob carry it on, and it's in microfiche up at the second story in the Milpitas Library. I hope there's backup of all that.
Actually, Robert, that has recently all been taken and re-digitized and is going to be available throughout the entire Santa Clara County library system.
Wow.
Also, since it's now digitized, will also be read by OCR, optical character recognition, so we can electronically find anything in it. We are right now, we're going to talk to them a little bit more about seeing if we can have access to it, which brings me to another question that I can bring directly to Mort. So we've been talking to the library a little bit about doing this ourselves, and this is how we found out that the job has already been done, which is great. But we were trying to also, have a copy for the society for our own research, so we don't have to actually go to the library. Because the reason we have to go to the library is that they can't release anything that's not in public domain. So the question comes up, do you still own all the publishing rights of the Milpitas Post?
I can't answer that question, but my gut feeling is that there isn't anybody who would probably claim those rights.
Right.
And have you been dealing with Brewster Cayley at the Internet Archive? Does that name ring a bell?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, he has digitized many newspapers and created a reader's guide in some form.
Index.
I don't know what the form is, but so you can get an index in effect. And I will get you his email address. And I think he could be of assistance on this. He happens to be a good friend of our daughter, Amy, so he'll take my phone calls. So I will get you that information. I think it's a very important project.
Wonderful. Rob, you had your hand up again?
I was just going to say, I don't know if it's still available at City Hall, but Mort primarily, and then myself and Tom Gilson, and a former editor, wrote a book about the history of Milpitas as kind of a journalist's take on the progression of the town for the city's 50th anniversary. And that's like a 100-page synopsis of what we thought were the most important stories and kind of the backstories of things. And I don't know if that's still available or not, but if it is, it'd be at the City Hall front desk. And that's a pretty, pretty cool.
I can answer that. The City Hall does not have copies, but there are some copies at the Milpitas Chamber of Commerce for sale. I went into City Hall probably several years ago, and they said that they didn't have any. And I discovered that there was a small quantity of copies. And like I say, they're at the Milpitas Chamber of Commerce on Hillview Drive. And occasionally somebody that goes in, several of the Historical Society books are there and are available for sale. But one of them is the one that Vincensky, and that's actually a really nice book. I mean, I think I have perhaps 2 copies.
Thank you. Yeah, if they ever run out, I have that whole project on one of my computers here at home still that I could do.
Oh, that's great to know.
I could do a soft copy of that, I'm sure. So Bob or anyone could reach out. I could find that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, you guys. I want to thank Mort and Rob Devincenzi so much for what you've done for Milpitas' history. Without the Milpitas Post, it wouldn't be there. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for that.
Great. Do we have any other questions? Yes, Carmen, hi. Unmute, Carmen.
Hello, everyone. Great to see you, Mort, and I really enjoyed, your conversation with us. It's so inspiring. We moved to Milpitas in 1963, if you can hear me. And my father used to work at one of the ranches. I was just wondering, do you remember some of the names of the early ranches in Milpitas? Or the ranchers?
Well, a smattering of them. Many of the people would come into town and you'd sit and talk. And I remember going out on several occasions to either a branding on one of the ranches that was running cattle, or helping with some of the apricot drying, different events on the ranches. Virtually all of the, and Weller Kirtner, of course, would be a wonderful source for that information, because the the Kurtners and the Wellers owned so much land in Milpitas, both downtown and out toward the hills and up in the hills. I don't know who, well, the many of the people who originally came from the Azore Islands settled on these hillsides and eventually came to own property because they were hillside farmers over on the islands in the Azores. And they particularly were very successful growing peas out of season. So they got a good price in San Francisco and shipped them out of Milpitas's packing plants downtown Milpitas.
Do you remember some of these names?
I just know my father, when he was back in the 1930s, when he was a teenager, they used to come and pick the crops or some of the, there's a lot of orchard trees. And he told me the farmer was an Italian farmer, but I just can't remember the name, but it was, so my father loved Milpitas when he was a kid. So when he got older, married, and he raised, that's why he moved to Milpitas in the 1960s, when he was already an adult and married. But we have, he loved Milpitas since he was a kid. That was back in the 1930s. So I was just wondering who the farmers or the ranchers were at the time. I know we have the McCarthy Ranch, the Weller, Kurtner.
If somebody wants to do the research, you can get plat maps down at, well, a title company could get it for you. Or you can get it through the assessor's office.
That's a good idea. Okay.
In the
Great.
county. And they would show the ownership of the property. Now, some of it may not be, it might be a bank or a trust company or something, but there would be many of the, particularly smaller parcels would have the person who was living on that site.
Okay, great. And my last question is, where was your first home where you lived in Milpitas? Where was it located?
Well, our first home obviously was the back of the Giacomazzi house. And we lived there for about a year or
more than that,
maybe a couple of years. Then we moved up to Sunny Hills and we bought one of these houses that was done by a San Francisco architectural firm called Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. And we were the one of three people who bought that model house. Everybody else who bought a conventional, same kind of thing that Sunny Hills had been building up till that time. But I guess we stayed at that house. We enlarged it to accommodate our third daughter. I can't remember now. I think it was that. And then moved into, well, we purchased the home on Mount Hamilton Road, just up the east side, when my father-in-law and mother-in-law had moved to Nevada City and they retired, so their house was available and we bought it from them.
So the house that I grew up in was that house in Sunny Hills, and it was right at the edge of the subdivision. So behind the house was all fields, all the way up to, you could run around in the field and go up to the Weller adobe, which you weren't supposed to do, but we did. And that was the first integrated subdivision.
Right. Is that the one on Coelho?
Yep.
Coelho Street? Oh, so you lived across the street from the Gardiers.
So we
Yeah.
lived on Coelho Street, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
Coelho and Cortez.
Mhm.
Yeah, I grew up in Sunny Hills too when I was a kid, so.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Do you want to wrap it up, Bill?
Yes,
Bill,
I was looking for my unmute button. It moved.
Bill,
Used to be there. Yes,
can I say something?
you bet.
Okay, good. I want to thank Mort and his daughter for coming tonight.
Yes.
I think we had talked more, you and I, about doing this. And I was able to get hold of Rob, so I'm delighted to see him here tonight, DeVincenzi. We had so many fun times at your home, Mort, when you moved down to the open space place where you are now.
Yeah.
And came to one of your daughter's weddings, I remember. And she had the group of gals from, I can't think the name of the,
Side saddle.
yes, exactly.
Yeah,
And
that was me. That was
that
me.
was you. That was
Yeah, we
so much
all four of
fun.
us got married here.
Yeah, it was just great. We came to that wedding and the girls entertained us. And Elaine had mentioned, I guess it was you then, probably like to go crabbing.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right.
And we gave you a crab net
net for a wedding present.
as a wedding gift. And
Yes.
my husband was crazy. And he said, oh no, they'll love it. They'll love it. Well,
Harriet, I still have it.
do you-
I still have that crab net in the garage.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that was so much fun. We always enjoyed coming to your lovely, lovely place there. It was just so nice. And we enjoyed hearing about all your trips more to enjoy opera here, there, and everywhere. And we just kind of lost touch when you moved down there, but we did come down a few times for your anniversary 1 year, and your grandkids were all playing musical instruments. It was just so wonderful. We really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you, Harriet. It brings back a lot of memories.
Oh, yeah.
Time for a big round of applause, you guys. Everybody in Milpitas,
Yes.
let's give them a big round of applause right now. Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, everyone. If I'm going to, unless, does anybody else have any last questions?
Well, I didn't get my question answered.
Well, you sort of did.
Who was that?
It was Mike Pellizzari, I think.
Yeah, I thought that sounded like Mike. Did you have a question, Mike?
Well, I don't know. Should I ask it?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. I'm wondering if Mort or Elaine or Deva Luna,
Yeah.
whether any of you were involved in the making of the Milpitas Monster.
Nope, not me.
I was aware it was going on, and we certainly publicized it and thought it was a kick. And I didn't realize that an institution was growing up right in our town. It was an amazing production, and I don't think anybody has to make any apologies for its hands-on quality, because it did have the character of the people who put that together. And Bob certainly deserves that accolade.
Well, they put us on the front page of the newspaper before the costume was finished. They wanted to know when we're going to have the premiere, and we picked a date in October sometime. And then they kept the town up to every week there was a report. And because of that notoriety, our great title took off. Milpitas monster. So.
I
it's
think,
over.
I think I want to say something about just the fact that a small community newspaper can just really hold a community together, can help it grow. And that's almost like something that is lost now, that we don't really have papers so much anymore, now that everything's sort of going online. And so I think that this was really a special time. And maybe we'll have these things happen again in different ways.
Yeah, yeah.
I really don't think that'll ever happen. It'll never be that as good as it was then, with frontier days and everybody knew everybody, and it was just a wonderful time. We came in the late 60s. Bob had a wonderful job, and Dick DeLong was the city manager, and he let him go ahead and do really screwy things. But, and Phil Nelson was always there to take pictures. The town knew what was going on through you in your paper. And now we don't know what's going on around town.
Yeah.
Well, this has been wonderful, folks. I'm gonna officially close the meeting, but we can all stay and socialize. So can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to.
Yeah.
Okay, did you get that, Carolyn? Who did the motion?
Santos, motion to. adjourn.
Santos. Of course it was Santos. Can I get a second, Harriet?
Of course, second.
Okay. Everyone in favor. Okay, so we can try a couple things here. We can all kind of chat over each other, or we can try breakout rooms. If anybody knows what that is, I can just kind of assign like 4 or 5 people at a time, can just go into a room and we can just kind of chat for a while, and then they can switch around. If that sounds fun, or we can just stay in this big Brady Bunch grid here. Anybody have any preferences on that?
I want to go to the room that Joanne brought cookies to.
I know. Yeah, we don't get our cookies this way. That's the.
That's sad, isn't it, Steve?
Yeah.
Let me add something. I want to say that we've really enjoyed ourselves, but we're a little tired at the moment. So we're gonna sign off. But
Okay.
I do want to say that if you want to call my dad and ask him questions or chat about things, he's in the phone book, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, Mort Levine. Call him up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Don't send any emails. No emails, no texts, but he always answers the phone. Anyway, bye, guys.
Bye,
Bye.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Rob. Standing.
Hi, Mort.
Bob.
Good seeing you, Mort. Thank you.
Bob, good to see you.
Thank you for inviting me, Harriet. It's really good
Yeah.
to see you.
So Rob, I see you work for the Marin Independent Journal now. Is that that was your original? You said Marin IJ
Gary.
when you signed on.
That's right. Yeah, I'm publisher of the Marin Independent Journal. I
Producer.
left Milpitas. Yeah.
Okay, so are you up in that area now?
No, I still live on the peninsula, and then I
She just
commute
has
up.
one.
Just they're indoor, outdoor.
Great, yeah, because my family was based there since my great grandmother moved to San Rafael.
Is that right? Yeah, our office is in San Rafael. Life has changed a little bit now, but yeah, I'm running the organization up there, and really was very fortunate to learn so much from Mort over the
Carrie.
20 plus years. So, and I try to carry on a lot of the community journalism that I learned down here up there. So that's been great.
Wonderful. Yeah, my family had a long history with that paper.
Yeah, Jay.
Over
Yeah.
to the generations too.
Yeah, we're 160 years old this year. So
Yeah.
Rob, I have a question for Rob.
yes.
Rob, what was the name of that book that you put on about of Milpitas?
It's called Milpitas 5 Dynamic Decades.
Okay, I'm the one that gave you the picture of the cover of my grandparents my grandfather working in the hay press.
Sure, I remember clearly.
You remember
Yeah.
that? Okay.
There are terrific pictures in that book.
Yes, I
just-
enjoy it.
I just looked it up as we were on the meeting. You can buy it on Amazon,
Oh,
believe it or
really?
not, used for, who knows what shape it's in. But
Yeah.
but if the chamber has them for sale, that's great, because I don't know if I have a copy still. I'm gonna see if I can get a couple.
Yeah.
I have one somewhere.
I
Okay,
have it.
thank you.
That was really a fun it was like a year-long project, but that was a very fun project because Mort wrote a lot of that, and I just kind of supervised and wrote some of the chapters. But it was really his take on the most important news events over 50 years, boiled down into 100 pages or less, and he really did a remarkable job on that book, I thought. I mean, for the time that we spent on it, I think it's just a neat read. It was a fun project.
Yeah, it's nicely done. There it
There
is.
it is. There it is. Joe has it.
That's it.
Oh yeah, where's Joe?
Joe,
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, thank you, Joe. Yeah, yeah, there you go. Yeah, I that was a year. I missed the whole duck season that year because I was putting that book together. But anyway, thank you for bringing that up. I enjoyed doing that project.
Rob, quick question.
Yes, Harriet.
Phil Nelson,
Yes.
whatever happened to him? He was such a great photographer. When did he leave the Post?
He was really, I think, one of the best photographers the Post ever
Yeah,
had.
really.
And one of the most highly regarded. I don't know whatever happened. I believe he's passed, but I don't know that. I don't know that for a fact. I know I never worked with him directly because I came much later. And I don't.
He lived down in Boulder Creek some time ago. I remember he was it was one of my guest speakers in my photography class, and I have some of his pictures.
Yeah. So I don't know if his status at all and if he's still alive or not.
Just curious. Yeah. I didn't remember.
I reprinted a lot of his photos when we did that little historic section every
We're
week.
not on mute,
So
Joanne?
yeah, there you go.
Oh, there it is. Thanks, Joe. Yeah, that's a great picture.
That is a
I
great,
still have it.
yeah, that is a great picture. Thank you.
Joe, you have the book?
Yes.
I'd love to see it.
Catherine has to do. I've got a copy too.
Oh, okay.
Catherine. and
Catherine has a
Mike-
copy.
Yeah,
I have a copy somewhere.
we all have copies. Just Rob doesn't have one for some reason.
I'd heard about it, but I don't have one. I'd love to see it.
Yeah,
That photograph made,
There's Ben Gross.
Oh, yes.
And
Yeah.
Kathy Cardoza. There's
Kathy on the
Kathy Cardoza.
yeah, that was
Who's-
probably the most famous photo that ever ran in the Post.
Yes.
yeah.
Who's the
it wound up in
family on the
Life
cover
magazine.
of the book?
Kathy has left though. She's not
That-
here.
It's not as I don't.
She was at the meeting.
Yeah, I don't know. We don't know the family. That was really like collateral for selling homes in Parktown at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And it was kind of we thought representative of kind of the the change and the growth in Milpitas. And I think that photo was late 60s, 68 or something. It's in the
That was
credits.
Frontier Days. Yeah.
67.
Yeah.
It was
And then
in
the
Life magazine.
And then the Frontier Days was the most famous, and I think iconic photo of Ben Gross there, and it was on Life magazine. And
Yeah.
Yeah, the cover.
Kathy Cardoza was I think she was a junior at Ayer.
is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a famous photo that we had in the office for we that was a highly guarded print. So
She
Cover
was
of Life magazine?
rodeo queen or something.
yeah, Life magazine.
National Quarter Horse Queen.
Quarter horse. Okay. Yeah, she showed horses and rode them. Yes.
Nice.
And then Sandy Roberts, she was, wasn't she the Miss America?
Yes.
No,
Tina
junior.
America. Tina
Not
America.
Mr.
Oh, junior.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a picture of her in that book too.
Mhm. Yeah.
1960 something.
Yeah, and she wound up appearing in some Ford ads, I think.
Oh,
Yeah.
It was a-
Everybody's got their books out.
I know. Sorry, I brought it up.
I brought it up.
I don't have one.
I
I
need to
have to
get
get
one.
one.
I'll buy one for you, Harriet, if I make my way down there, I promise.
It came out with the 40th anniversary of the city, wasn't it? The 40th year?
50th. It was a
Yeah.
50th. Yeah, we were commissioned by the city council that year to put that book together. Yeah, it was a great project.
Hey, Bill, when is the next field trip?
Next,
You know, the last one
you
was.
mean,
really-
you mean
we
the
had a lot of
next
fun.
tour?
Tour.
Well,
Yeah,
we
I
need-
call it
we
a
need
field
to,
trip. Retired school teacher.
yeah, exactly. Well, we need to kind of figure out how things are looking this summer, but you know, it's might be a way to figure out how to do one. What do you think, Joe?
Well, the way that we like to do it these days is on a bus, and of course that's close quarters. So maybe we just have to figure out for this year just a different a tour, but a tour that maybe goes just to one or two places and doesn't use a bus, so that we don't have to put people into really close quarters.
Something outside.
Yeah, we'll just do it like this. We'll sit on the thing and then you just walk around town with a little cell phone and show us things.
Yes.
Do a walking tour of downtown.
Yeah, the walking tours are fun.
Some of the first ones we did, we had people driving their own cars. And they sort of ran from place to place.
That's right.
And-
Yeah, we had
and we-
signs and.
We had
stop
Steve and
to.
Joanne walking down Main Street.
That's right.
I did do that.
Well, if you guys are interested, one of the stories Mort told me about my building, which was the Auto Employees Credit Union building at 529 South Main Street. And a lot of people don't know, there's a little upstairs that consisted of a big conference room, a little kitchen, and an outdoor patio, and had sliding glass doors from the conference room and kitchen opened into the patio. And Mort said that when that was first built, that was the biggest conference room in town, and that they had all kinds of meetings, city council meetings, and everything in that building, there in that conference room. And he remembers them having all their hard liquor, whiskey, and everybody drinking, smoking cigars. And he remembers trying to look through that room, and it's just covered with smoke. And it was most sought after because they could open up the sliding glass doors, and at least the air wasn't choking with all the cigar smoke.
That's funny.
You know, there's the interview with Weller Kirtner, and he talked about that same room.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he talked about that same.
Yep.
There it is. There. He talked about that same room at the back, and he said that the committees and the commissions would get together, and someone would bring a lamb, and if it was a really big decision, it took two lambs to make the decision. He said we call those a two-lamb meeting.
Yeah.
What's that? Ula Lodge? What is that lodge?
No, that's the, whatever the,
That's Betancourt's apartment. building.
Apartments.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's still there. I know where it's at.
Yeah.
I see it every day.
yep.
Yeah, so this is the 529. Yeah.
And, but anyway, and it's the way it's situated, there's no windows. You can't really see anything from the outside. It's got like a louver wall or something like that. So those people could have a meeting there, and nobody would be able to know what was going on there.
That's funny.
Maybe that could be the next place for the Historical Society to think about obtaining if we can. Yeah, lots of ideas. That's a good one though.
Yeah.
Well, I need to drop, but it's really great to see you all, and appreciate having Mort on. He's really I think of Mort.
Icon.
I think of him as in that elite wall of founders of the town. I think he's right up there in the top 10 people that were influential. So anyway, thanks. It's great seeing you all. And
Bye.
Seeing you.
Rob,
Great to see you, Rob.
good to
Thank
see you
you.
too,
Good
Rob.
night.
Yeah.
good night. Thank you, Harriet, for inviting me.
Night.
Take
care, Rob.
For joining us.
Rob, talk to you soon. Okay.
Bye.
All righty.
I was so glad I was able to get a hold of Bob. I'd known him quite well and his family for years.
Yeah.
And so I found I still had an old email address. So I emailed him and he immediately got back to me like almost immediately with pictures of his two sons and everything. They all look alike, the round face and build. And so really missed him. So it was good he came. That was great.
The other thing he told me about that property was that when they were building it, they kept digging up Indian bones. And so in the back corner there's a pepper tree. And he said they took all the Indian bones that they dug up and put them in a pit back there in that back corner and then planted the pepper tree on it.
They were sure they were Indian bones, not human bones?
Oh,
They were,
Human bones on the other side.
No, not human bones, but I mean, you know, not Indian.
I don't know. That's all I was saying. What the back of the property there, where the pepper tree was, that was actually a creek. That's where the creek used to go. So where the building is probably would be an ideal place for a village or some type of habitation.
They found cemeteries. That's where they buried their dead, were in the cemeteries. They found the Ohlone Cemetery.
Good place to put them.
All up and down Main Street.
Yeah.
In fact, if you go over here on Abel on Abbott Street, next to the 7-Eleven, there's a big open plot that's never been able to be sold because it turns out it's got bones in that.
Oh.
Whoever buys it,
in your backyard.
Down.
I think I have some in my backyard.
And I talked to some of the old timers when I first got in the Historical Society, and they would tell about finding these Indian bones as they dug things up to build homes and businesses along Main Street, and they would haul them off to the dump.
The chapel in the middle of the Elmwood Jail that was a high-rise area. That was a big find.
There was a big dig there, yeah.
Yeah, so I think the chapel
In
was
the jail farm.
on top of it.
Do you guys remember the big deal about finding bones there around Elmwood and whatnot? And our Ben Gross's daughter ended up in jail one time and she was calling everybody to get bail money to get out of jail. And the story was she knew where the bones were and so on. Do you guys remember that?
No.
Oh, that was too funny.
Back in the early 90s, when they were building the addition to the jail, I got to go over there representing the Historical Society, and I got to help dig up some of the bones that they had. They hired the Ohlone Families group to disinter the bones and rebury them someplace else. But I got to be part of that. It's the only time I ever did that kind of a archaeological thing. But they worked their way down and they found different ways of burying the bones. So people's bodies at one part were buried sitting up or laying down, or maybe their religions changed. People have been living here in Milpitas, Indians have been living here for thousands of years.
Oh,
And so the religions changed over the thousands of years, and their burying practices changed. So we found cremations and all this other stuff. It was a fascinating thing to do.
They had a speaker come to the Historical Society and talk about the Indian burials and stuff at one time.
High lineage burial grounds. That's what it was. And people natives would come from all over the state for a week of mourning. High lineage Native American.
I'm ready to.
Yeah.
Goodbye. I'm going to Main Street.
All righty.
Thanks, Bill, for a really nice meeting. Appreciate it.
Sure. All right, everybody. That was great. We will see you all next month. And everybody stay safe and take care.
How were the bears, Bill, in Yosemite? Were they good?
I didn't see any bears.
Did you see the firefalls?
No, I didn't see a firefall either.
Shucks.
Yeah. It,
You just hung out in that lovely tent. That was
I
nice.
stayed in the tent. Yes, that was it.
Good night.
No, we
Bye-bye.
hiked a lot. We walked miles and miles, and it was great. And it was
The
wonderful.
weather was nice and everything.
Weather was amazing. We were,
Great.
short sleeves and it wasn't crowded.
I guess they-
And I actually got a reservation a week beforehand. I mean, usually it takes about a year to get into Yosemite. But yeah, it was very nice.
Did you have any trouble scaling Half Dome?
Not too much. I mean, El Capitan was a little harder, but Half Dome was pretty easy.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. I didn't even use any climbing equipment. I just free climbed that sucker.
Oh, wow. Oh, I'm impressed.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, we did a lot of hiking and just my family goes way back in Yosemite. In fact, that's the reason I exist. My parents were both Yosemite Park and Curry Company employees, and they met there.
Oh, wow.
My great grandparents and my grandparents and great grandparents on both sides. My great grandmother all spent time in Yosemite, and my great grandparents were friends of the Currys and the Tressiders. And yeah, so both sides of my family go back to Yosemite. Quite a ways.
They brought the toilets back today. So that means they're gonna be down.
Good night.
Okay.
All right. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good to see you, Bob. Good to see
Thanks
you,
for putting
Joe.
this together, Bill.
Hey, Don, wow, you grew a beard.
Yeah.
I love it.
Kind of look like Steve Munzel,
Hey.
Steve shouldn't be the only sexy guy in the around,
I love it.
No, that's the pandemic. When the pandemic hit and I didn't have to go in the office, I didn't shave.
Yeah.
So it's now like a year and 2 months old or whatever.
Don't turn into Rip Van Winkle.
That's right.
There you go.
Yeah.
I mean, I see Don every few weeks, so it's like it's been a progressive thing. So it's not such a shock to me, but I can tell that, yeah, you saw him just like, where'd that come from?
Well, Don, I think you look great. Keep it. It's a good addition.
So I'm trying to retire. I'm close to getting retired, and then I bought some property up in Calaveras County and up in the Sierras there. And so, I'm going to try to.
John Peoples, the mountain man.
There you go. Well, I'm going to, I got some acres, so I'm going to plant some wine grapes. And so instead of being a crusty old, bum or whatever, I'll be an eclectic winemaker.
Right on. That's good. Good
Sounds
for you, John.
good.
Good for you. Good for you. All right. Well, I'm gonna let you go. Everybody have a good evening. Just a little tidbit. I'm trying to revitalize Main Street. Have Christmas on Main Street. So I'm trying to do something little by little. I think we could do something. So
good.
We'll see where it goes. All right, everybody. Good night.
Good
Good seeing you, Steve.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.